All right. It's about 6 minutes past. We should probably get started. Do we have any new faces today? Anyone would like to introduce themselves?
Hello. Yes, I think I am a new face. This is the first time I'm joining this group. So how does that work? Should I introduce myself?
Yeah, if you could just obviously introduce yourself, say your name and what you're using Paketo Buildpacks for.
Fantastic. So my name is Anthony Dahan, and I have joined last week VMware, and in particular the Tanzu team. In the sense that I will be responsible for the Java build packs at Tanzu, including the Paketo Java build packs as well as the Tanzu ones. So I've been using build packs in the past before joining VMware for demos and even at a bank to actually streamline building of images, all the advantages, sharing the common best practices and common components across an organization, a large organization. Yeah, that's about it for me. I have also, maybe just to end my presentation, I have a special interest in ARM64 compatibility. I know some people have already investigated a little bit, and not to name them Dashon and Daniel Mikusa. Yeah, apart from that, pretty happy to be here. Hello.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I realized I forgot to ask for a designated note taker. So Anonymous Unicorn, thank you for writing down our new face. Could I get a note taker for this week?
I'm happy to do it.
Oh, right. Thank you so much. Great. I guess we should probably just go ahead and get into our agenda. So as it is the first meeting of the month, we are going to be taking a look at the roadmap and discussing some updates to it. I don't know how up to date it is. It says it's the 2023 roadmap. I'm looking at it right now. I'm not sure that it's...
Actually, it's the second meeting of the month, right?
Oh my gosh, it is. I got absolutely sniped by this.
We did do a bit of roadmap review last week, but
okay.
There weren't a lot of folks here with context on a lot of the items. So if folks feel like it's worthwhile to take the time to do that, we could do that today, like a revisiting. But if not, then that's also fine.
There's only a couple of items on the list right now. So if we wanted to just take a quick look, how does that sound, everyone?
That sounds good to me.
Perfect. Go ahead and share my screen. Can y'all see this? All right. Hold on, let me fix my camera so I can see everything. All right, perfect. Let's start off with things that are in progress. First up, we have Node.js RFC 14 support Yarn Berry.
Yeah, this one I am still working on. That first story there. The other two are blocked on that first issue. But it's progressing pretty nicely, and hopefully I will have that first one done pretty soon so we can get started and hopefully parallelize the other two issues.
Awesome. Sounds great. Let's talk about the other one that is currently in progress, which is default behavior for Buildpacks set language ecosystem environment variables. Oh my goodness. I think that there is probably needs to be a little bit of updating to this. I know for a fact that the situation in .NET Core has changed quite a bit. So I might move this back to needs investigation and go through and we got to do another re-audit of how things are looking. All right. I think I will move that back then. And yeah. Let's talk about things that are in status or that are needs investigation. First off, we have reloadable process types. Is there any update on reloadable process types? Looks like the only one that is still open is Ruby. You have any Ruby maintainers in that could comment on this?
Yeah, I'm here, and we have this prioritized to look into. We just have not gotten to it yet, but it's definitely on our radar, and we will certainly be taking a look very soon. And hopefully by the next time we do this meeting, hopefully we will have done this.
Great. Love to be able to check something off the roadmap. Next up, we just looked at this one. Distribute build packs via Docker Hub. I saw that there was a pipeline builder update the other day that added optional stuff to do Docker Hub things, which is maybe the most non-specific sentence I could have said about that. But I haven't verified this with David O'Sullivan or Dan, and I know that on the Rust end, there is still some pipeline changes that we are trying to get through. So I will leave this open for the time being and point David O'Sullivan and Dan Makuza at this as well. Take a look. Great. And then we have actually two closed issues. First off, we have implement dependencies RFC 003 through 006. I think that everything is done.
Yeah, the last items here were related to the depth server closeout, which I didn't really want to wait another month to do that before closing this out. So I closed this issue out, and the removal of the depth server will be taken care of separately. So yeah, I think we're done with this.
Awesome. And second, we have implement RFC 006, reduce build time complexity for .NET runtimes. We added some backwards compatibility into the new build pack that was proposed to this .NET Core ASP.NET Runtime build pack that would allow build packs that required the old build plan API to continue to function until we 1.0 .NET Core, which allowed us to remove or to archive the old build packs and kind of effectively get rid of their provision API. So with that, basically we have succeeded. We've removed basically as much surface area as we can until we completely deprecate the old build plan API. So we're calling this closed out. And yeah, I think that hopefully it has made the .NET Core build pack make a lot more sense, because it used to be a bit of you had to kind of get your yarn out to try and figure out how to really worked. Yeah, awesome. I think that we can also move that into the done column. And then we have stuff that is planned. We typically go over the planned stuff as well and give an update on that, correct? Okay. Starting from the top, we have remote debug work. And this looks about as sparse as I normally think it looks.
I think the thing we were planning to look at targeting next was Node.js. This one's relatively straightforward as far as implementation goes. Node.js has like a flag or a couple of flags that you can set when you actually start the node runtime that just say like spin up a second are like attached to a port, so that you can have this kind of like debug server be able to like connect to the process and manage it. And I think we just need to like specify those flags when the environment variable is set. So this is a type of thing that like if folks in the open source community were interested in, like the barrier to implementation is pretty low. It's not like a lot of work to get remote debugging type functionality working in a node thing. But otherwise, I know the maintainers for Node at some point were planning to get around to it, probably sometime in the next couple of months. I don't know the progress or status of any of the other languages, though.
That's fair. All right, that's good. It's a great update. At least hearing one of these is potentially in progress soon. Auto-generated reference documentation. This is an old one that's been kicking around for a while. I don't have any updates on this as a content maintainer or anything like that. It's just been kind of placed on the back burner as we've been trying to pick up other maintainership work and that sort of thing.
I think the primary blocker here has been changes to the build packs that are implemented in Packet such that they like actually catalog what their configuration options are in build pack toml. Here's what the Java build packs do. If you go to like a build pack toml for any one of the Java build packs, there's like a whole section that has to do with configuration where they've kind of cataloged what are the environment variables, what's the default setting, and some text that says what it does. I think we wanted to do the same thing on the Packet side before we got to a point where you could then have some automation that basically just scrapes all of that configuration information and presents it in a like a more easily digestible format on the documentation pages. So I don't know. As far as like progress goes, I don't think anyone has looked into this, but if someone was interested in implementing such a thing, I think the next step would be like some sort of support for that type of configuration to be read in by a Packet-based build pack. So modifications to Packet would probably be the next step.
We've also something to think about as well as we've been shifting, at least on the Packet side, our approach to how we load in environment as well. In particular, I think a good example of that would be like Nginx or HTTPD, where we try and not query OS or environment variables all the time, and we try and sort of load them all up into an object that can be passed around, just because that's kind of easier to intuit over, and it does, you know, fancy things like parses for you and that sort of thing. Could be potentially something for us to look into as well, but I don't want to actually add more to the size of the story. All right, and finally we have define an image dependency retention policy for Paketo images.
I think the main blocker here was for Dan to write something up that we could post publicly. And then from there, it would be developing some automation to actually implement the retention policy.
Gotcha. Then that sounds like we should probably reach out to Dan. And I think beyond that, it would probably be relatively straightforward to implement after that. All right. I think that brings us up to date on our roadmap. Are there any questions?
The only other thing is we have items that were basically brought up as like kind of the larger 2023 roadmap that were outlined in this blog post. And I just wanted to make sure that like, even though we don't have issues yet for them and they're not yet appearing in the roadmap that you see here, they're like on the larger metaphorical roadmap, and we will absolutely be like getting real issues written up for them and like get work started in progress. But the blog post is live. I just posted it in the chat there. The main things were like ARM64 support, SBOM, provenance data, signing images for the actual build packs themselves, and stacks. And then the last bit was mostly, or the last couple of bits were continuation in a lot of the stuff we've done in stacks and builders. So like introducing new stacks, kind of figuring out what our builder story is going to be. I know there's already an open RFC about language specific builders, but like really trying to figure out what that looks like going forward, how we can scale out that kind of thing when we have more build packs and more languages and more stacks. You know, it's just going to be a lot more kind of combinatoric permutations of things, and how do we make that reasonable to support and easy for users to understand. And then the last bit is about dependencies, mostly being able to separate dependencies from their build packs in such a way that the sets of dependencies, where they come from, that kind of thing can be easily swapped out, replaced, moved around inside infrastructures. So those are kind of like the high level things. We'll be mapping out some more kind of specifics of what we're planning to do in those areas. But yeah, if you haven't already, feel free to read the blog post. And then there are some discussion topics that are attached to each one of the sections where like I'd like to see that kind of further discussion of what we're planning to do start to happen.
Great. Thank you. All right. I think that we, excuse me. I think that we can launch into the next segment of our meeting. Let me check that I actually know what that is. It is outstanding RFCs. Let's take a look. First up, we have proposed additional JVMs in Java build pack.
Yeah, that one's still blocked until we resolve the language specific RFC.
Gotcha. In that case, I guess it is it marked status block? Yeah, all right. Great.
Yeah.
Require a specific version of Java in the build plan. Are there any updates on this? It looks like there was a post 4 days ago. Anthony, it looks like you have been diving into this a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, just a bit. So there are two things. They are not exactly the same issue, but right now the default version for the Java build packs is 11, and the modern frameworks such as Spring Boot 3 require Java 17. So you can imagine that sometimes that can cause trouble because of that. So so there is the matter of the default Java version. So it's a different RFC, and I think it was approved this morning. So yeah, the default version is going to move to Java 17 in a month or so. And then I think the this other issue that you're looking at is probably something that is related to being able to let the user choose the Java version. And there were suggestions to actually be smart about it and try and detect what is the Java version that is required by the project. So yeah, go ahead.
Maybe I can add on to that.
Cool.
So it's a colleague of mine, and Jan, actually, who wrote that RFC. So the idea here was that kind of the detection logic for the Java version is all part of libjvm currently. So that feels kind of wrong that the libjvm looks at files that are actually in the area of other build packs, right? So for example, the executable char is actually responsible for executable chars, right? But the libjvm does look at the meta information of the executable char build pack. And we had this idea that actually the Java build pack as a whole could look at the POM and detect that the POM requires a certain Java version, and therefore make sure that this Java version gets installed automatically. Similar to how it does it for the executable char based on the meta info that is available there. But we didn't want to introduce like another responsibility into the libjvm looking at POMs, right? Then the next one would be adding Gradle support to libjvm. So that would kind of, hunting and outside of the territory of that build pack, basically, right?
From my point of view, what this RFC would need is more people jumping in and discussing, because it's a little bit about back and forth between complexity of using the build plan for orchestrating this. So you could delegate the responsibilities, right? The Maven build pack could know how to read a POM. The Apache Tomcat build packs could know the minimum versions of different Tomcat versions and other things. And the potential complexity this brings to the build packs is more like the side Daniel is currently choosing here. In particular, hinting at the current problem with Java 17 and Spring is going to be solved by bumping the version. So I guess that's the back and forth and a bit stalemate there. I think Daniel went on and started to kind of try to collect some use cases and figuring out if there are use cases that can't be supported by the current model where libjvm decides a lot of things and users have to, if in doubt, present the version. From my point of view, it's showing quite a lot, right? The Java sample project doesn't build currently because it's bumped to Spring 3, and these kind of Spring Boot 3 and these kind of things. But I don't think that this RFC will proceed on its own.
Maybe one thing to add here, I guess that's actually the mechanism that this RFC proposes is exactly what the Node build pack does to like decide on the Node version, right? So it uses the build plan there and to negotiate which Node version should be used.
Yeah,
so it shouldn't be too complex, right? It's already done in the Node build pack.
For what it's worth, I think there should be something done to make the build plan more transparent to the user. So if something goes wrong with the build plan, it's really hard to figure out. But I think this can be solved by logging output, either by providing debug logs or even provide some proper output, right? I mean, you can tell the user why you chose a particular version of Java that you used or Node. But it does require effort. Otherwise, it's like undebuggable.
For Node, if I recall correctly, when a version is selected, we actually show all of the potential sources from where we picked the versions, and then we, say we elected this one, and then the way that we end up electing a version is based on like a handmade priority graph of known sources, where we say, if it comes from, I wouldn't know them off the top of my head right now, but like, if it comes from your package JSON, that's a higher thing than something else, which is a higher thing than something else. The build plan is unfortunately opaque.
I think this could be changed by either like logging something in detect or by actually approaching upstream and making sure that the lifecycle actually informs better about this. And I think you can choose how complicated you make it. I mean, you can always opt out and go back to the current default, which is the user has to pick the version, right? So you could say, oh, there's a conflict, I can't solve it. I'm not going to set up this graph of precedence order. Instead, I'm telling the user that I can't, right? There's, I don't know what, your POM requests Java 8, but your framework wants Java 17. There's no way I can decide this for you. Figure it out. So I think you can provide a good user experience. The main point I'm seeing there is, I think this is exactly what Buildpacks promised, right? You don't have to figure this out. That Spring requires a newer Java version and these kind of things. So I would really like to see some support of that, and I can see these use cases, but I do understand the complexity that this brings, and that in particular, the complexity that might leak to the user in terms of, do I understand the selection process, needs to be well orchestrated.
If you look
But-
at the node one, if you find the right piece of code, it is pretty obvious how it chooses the right one. And I think, like you said, the one at the top of the list is you've actually told them what you want.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, user choice has to be on the top of the list, of course. If you request a certain Java version, if it's if it's Java 8 and you want to run it with Spring Boot 3, then that's your problem. But we should pick that version, and it won't work, of course. But that's the same on your machine, right? If you install Java 8 and start Spring, it won't work. So yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something with regard to the comparison with Node.js. I think in Node.js you specify, I mean, in package.json you can specify the version. You can definitely specify the version in a single way, right? In a singular way. I think the difficulty with Java is that there is not one single way of specifying the version of Java that you want from your POM or from your build.gradle. In Spring Boot, by default, if you go to start.spring.io, there is a property named Java version that's going to be set. Cool, this is nice for Spring, but for other frameworks, that doesn't have to be the same way. Maybe they can use a Maven compiler or I mean any other properties that they want to, right? So this is
I think there's a global one for Maven that says the compilation target version, right? And kind of that's the minimum you need to have at least, otherwise it won't start.
It's like I think the
obviously like
particularly odd thing
Maven is
sorry, Philip. Go on.
plugins, but yeah.
I think the particularly odd thing is if there is a single source for a particular version, like you use Spring Boot 3 or you use a Tomcat that requires a certain minimum version, even this is not considered. We could even implement it in a way where as soon as there's a conflict, we just opt out and say, yeah, sorry, here's why we don't know which version to pick, please select it. What currently happens is the default version 11 is picked, and that's the wrong one for the most recent Spring framework. I think that's particularly bad. This will be solved by bumping the version, but I don't know when the next time we'll discover a problem like this again. Hopefully, we'll define also a regular update process. So it's like Java 21 is around the corner, I think. And I think we aligned on, let's say after 1 year after release, we'll just bump the version. So maybe we'll run into these problems less frequently by being more on the modern side of versions, but I don't know yet.
Yeah, I was just going to add that for Maven, at least, I mean, Gradle is similar as well, but Maven allows you to have parent POMs, and the parent POM might not actually be local or part of the project. The parent POM could be being stored in a local private Maven repository that's being used by organizations. So I tried doing this before to derive Java version from a Maven POM file, and you can't just parse the POM file that you have handy. And you can't use the Maven API to do what you want to do there either, because that will only parse a local POM. You actually have to bring the whole of Maven into being so that it can, basically evaluate all of its stack variables, and then you can ask that what you want. And the current preferred way for doing that with Maven is to invoke the command line and ask it what the property is. So there's no actual Java way to invoke Maven to obtain the version that Java would be using for a given Maven project via a direct API call. You have to go resort to using like system exec to invoke Maven as a command, which is crazy, but I can kind of see why they went that way. It's not easy. I can believe SBT would be somewhere as well, and Leiningen and all the other various ones. I've messed with a lot of them to try and resolve this. It's, yeah.
But even worse than that, that would actually mean that you would need to have you would, I mean, if you were to actually try and find, the right version, going through the hierarchy, then you would need to have Maven, so you would need to have Java as well. So unfortunately, you're I think at the point where we're doing the detection, we're not there yet. I mean, we don't have a Java runtime yet, so
Yeah, that was
So-
a chicken and
so,
egg that I hit when
yeah,
I
exactly.
tried doing this as well.
Yeah, I was thinking like kind of supporting the 90% case there, maybe, where I guess most people don't go crazy with their Java version and do this with some templating that is fetched from some other source, right?
It becomes more common the larger the organization is that's doing the development, and the more structured their dev teams become. You start having things where the parent POM will be supplied via like the architecture team that includes all the dependencies that these projects are allowed to use or should be using, that kind of stuff. And that will also lock down the Java version. As for the chicken and egg problem about needing Java to run Maven, but needing Maven to find out what version of Java you need to run Maven with, you can cheat if you pre-compile something that has the Maven jars as a native executable, and then you can drive that directly and it won't need a JVM. So that was my get out when I hit the end of that at the end of the day, was to write a small program and compile it as a native Java app that then ran, didn't need Maven, didn't need Java, but could tell me what versions I would need if I were to use that project.
Yeah, just
Anyway,
to say
that RFC is anyway only about having the potential to orchestrate that through the build plan, not necessarily poking with the details of how Maven does it or how Maven could provide something. There's even like Tomcat has like documented minimum Java versions. I mean, they are far lower than 17, but I think that's like the newest might be now on 17. I'm not sure about that. So maybe that runs out of the problem space once we are on more recent versions of Java as the default. But yeah, these sources would be more clear in terms of what they want. But anyway.
Yeah, even for the Node.js build pack, it's not that during the build phase, the build pack goes out and figures out what version the user specified, say through like an environment variable, like that flattening of everything, all the sources of where a version could be specified, it all happens in detect, such that when you get to the build phase, you're just looking at the build plan. Like the build plan is, no matter what, is the source of truth at that point in time to say, how do I figure out what version should be installed? So like you could even just say like the only thing that's expected here is that during detect, Java is just going to turn that environment variable, that's the toggle that's currently the way you specify the version, and it's just going to inject that into the build plan. So that by the time you get to the build phase, you're only looking at the build plan and you're not looking at environment variables. So then at that point further on, other things can inject versions in through the build plan from other sources. That's how all the like node stuff works. It's how, I mean, basically it's how all the packet-based build packs work. They all just push everything into the build plan and expect that to do resolution.
I think in an effort to try and keep us moving, I would like to move on to the next RFC. Sounds like there's some interesting discussion to continue to have on this, though. Next up, we have add new Java RFC for composite draft branches. Seems like there was an update 5 days ago. Looks like commenting is settled down. I'd like to make a final call on comments for votes, with February 7th, 2023 being the final day for comments / vote. Thanks. You guys better get on it, I guess, then.
Which date was that? I just didn't catch it for the notes.
February 7th, today, February 7th.
Okay.
Today.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. All right. If no one has any other comments on this, let's move to RFC selecting the next default Java version. This looks like it has approvals. Any comments on this? It sounds like something has been reached.
That's the other one we've spoken about.
Yep.
It will increase the default Java version to 17 and trigger that will like provide some documentation about the future of how this will be done and announce that we'll bump the default and these kind of things. So I think it's going to be merged, I guess, today now with the approval and the end of the final voting period.
Yeah. I assume that David or Anthony will merge that. Awesome.
Yeah.
Proposal to create language family builders. There have been any updates on this?
I think it's still open for discussion.
Oh, I see that you added a variant since I last viewed this. So I'll have to take a look. All right. And finally, we have let's see here. We have a sharing across Node.js Buildpacks/extensions. I have not seen this one. I'm unfamiliar with it. I assume that y'all talked about this last week.
Michael, you want to provide some quick background on this?
Sure, yeah,
I
I can give some context. I opened this one because, you know, we're working on an extension to support UBI8. In that extension, we need to do in the some of the similar detection in particular for like, is this a node build pack or not? Want to make that match exactly what's in the rest of the build packs, because we really just want to, you know, we really want to just replace some parts of the Node engine sub build pack. And so ideally I want to reuse that logic, and I can do a little bit of that today by, you know, using things from the existing build packs. I'm not sure that they're necessarily public though. I also noticed that like there's say three copies of the same code in a couple of the different build packs. Constants are defined, you know, in line. And so I just thought like it would both improve the build packs and let us more safely share by putting them into some common place where, yeah, like all the sub build packs use this. They all have the same common definition for like, what's the name of node, what's the name of NPM. And so I'm proposing to do that refactoring to let those pieces. I don't think it's going to be a ton of code. You know, it's probably 100 lines of code or less. But it will avoid drift and make it so that we can reuse it more easily.
Sounds a bit like halfway to what libjvm is for the Java language family. And I mean, that extension you're planning for is another source of installing Node. So it's pretty similar to what the reasons for libjvm were. It's just, I guess there won't be so many providers as it is for Java VMs.
Yeah, there's, and it's not strictly about, well, some of the common things are like, find me the, like a path. So it's not solely like, hey, is there a package JSON and is there a version? So, but that, in the end, most of them do support that. So I think you're right that that's a good analog.
All right. Sounds like there probably needs to be some more discussion about this from Node.js maintainers.
Yeah, the reason we had it brought up originally, this was open just as an issue in the Node.js repo. And I think the Node.js maintainers, if I'm speaking on their behalf, are inclined to accept this type of change. Like it's something we think would make the build packs better. It would be better to reduce the shared code across all the build packs. And you know, generally, we just think that it's probably the right direction as the build packs kind of grow in scope and complexity. The thing we wanted to bring up and why I had Michael open it as an RFC and propose in front of other language family maintainers is just that this is the type of pattern we're starting to see emerge across a number of different things. And I just wanted to get feedback. Generally, I know the Java folks have been dealing with this concept through libjvm for a while now. Their feedback, I think Dan at some point had some comments on the open issue. And then I just wanted to get feedback from other maintainers about their thoughts, generally speaking. I think in the long run, what we're probably likely to do is open up a separate repository, one that can be versioned and released independently from any one of the build packs. I know that at some point we had discussed like maybe we'll just put a package in one of the build packs. The issue becomes like, how do you version that outside of the versioning cycle of the build pack itself? Just introduces a bunch of complexities. This is probably going to have to be its own repo that lives separately. Do we want to think about how we name those types of things so that they're like easily identifiable across the organization? So there are some kind of like general questions and just some feedback that we're soliciting outside of specifically the Node folks. I think conceptually the Node folks are, would approve this kind of change.
So this is more in line with like, do we call it lib.node.js? Do we, and then if I wanted to do this for .NET, it would be lib.NET Core or something like that. That sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really about us trying to figure out like, is there a pattern around this that we can say like, this is what we think makes sense as far as like pulling out this kind of common library? Are there other language families that could benefit from this? And if they do, are there just some things that they should follow that are kind of like generally agreed upon so that this doesn't just become a chaotic, every single language family is doing something slightly different. Granted, I understand there's going to be differences between these things. There will be reasons that the libraries are different, but there's like a lot of commonality and just trying to like make sure we're all kind of on the same page before we start stamping out lots of these across different language families, if that becomes the case.
I'd be curious as well if like we also found some commonality, like I guess amongst a larger set of build packs. I guess most of the time when we see that, we would move it into the larger sort of library you have, either Packet or libpack. We see, I guess, a big enough swath, but this is just sort of meant to be 100% language specific.
Yeah, a lot of this is like, there are some specific files that show up in that language ecosystem that lots of build packs care about, right? Like NPM and Yarn and Node all look at like different variations of files that are all very specific to just that ecosystem. And like .NET Core probably wouldn't benefit terribly from knowing anything about those files, right? So like it's that kind of thing that it's like, we've got, how do I parse package JSON in like 4 different build packs, and like we probably could just have that in one place and then have the other build packs just import that code.
I think the really interesting idea is around like detecting whether or not something is Node or requires Node is highly applicable, like for like .NET and I assume Ruby as well. All the build packs who themselves have Node requirements because everything uses npm and makes JavaScript files. So yeah, I like that idea. That's cool.
I just know that like, for example, like .NET Core has these like project files, and I assume that the project file is probably parsed and read for all sorts of reasons across a number of the build packs in that ecosystem. So like it may make sense for there to be some type of like common library for doing that type of functionality.
Yeah, no, that's totally makes sense.
Anyway, yeah, just saying this is there. The folks who are, other language maintainers and have some interest in that concept of this like shared library, feel free to comment.
Should we change the title then to reflect this? That
I think that personally, I would like to see it proved out in one method, and if we decide, oh, this is not working, we can try it a different way going forward with another like having an RFC that binds how we do libraries for individual Buildpack families right off the bat might not be exactly what we want. If we do find that this works and then we do another one and it works for that one and we do another one and it works for that one, or two or however many, we could codify it and say like, hey, if you have shared libraries you like to share across a language family, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to name it, that sort of thing. But I think while we're developing the structure, it makes more sense to not try and make it a top level mandate.
No, that's not what I wanted to
Okay,
suggest.
sorry.
Just for the title of this RFC, right? That kind of reflects that we want to discuss the general direction we want to go in, and like more an optional thing, of course. If it doesn't make sense for that language family, of course we don't need it. But yeah, if you want to have something for your language family, you should follow like this common kind of pattern.
I'm not 100% sure I follow how we would want to change the naming of this RFC for this. Make the naming more like shared libraries, or like shared libraries for Buildpack families and / extensions or something in that realm to make it more general.
Something like that, yeah.
I don't want to like just magic up a title here, but is that more in the vein of what you would be looking for?
At least for me, I don't know what the rest are thinking here.
There's just one thing to keep in mind there. If I have seen it correctly, it's an RFC in the Node.js folder. So if it is an RFC for a node, then we don't need to make the title more general. If it is not, then we should also move it out. But I have the feeling that right now it's very specific for a node and might be a blueprint for discussing that project-wide. So maybe there's other channels, other chances to make sure everyone reads this. It's still an RFC for node, I believe.
Yes,
because
that's
it's
exactly
specific
right.
for node, what is in the RFC, right? Deriving a pattern is maybe something to trigger a discussion with different means than the title of the RFC.
In that case, then, do we maybe think it's sufficient to talk about it in this working group and maybe put it in something like the general Slack channel as like a, hey, this is a potentially interesting precedent for how we would do shared libraries between Buildpacks? Getting a little bit too much case law for my liking. Anyway, are there any other discussions that we would like to have on these RFCs? Nope. All right, hold on. Let's see. CNB updates. Meeting for ARM support work on Thursday at 1500 UTC. On Thursday, so 2 days from now. Could someone speak to this real quick?
Yep, that's fine. I posted that. Yeah, for anyone who's interested in ARM progress on the CMB project upstream, this is, we're just kind of like getting people who are going to start working on the project together, and feel free to join the meeting. Just chime in this thread if you want to get included. I don't think that probably end up posting a Zoom link at the time that we're going to meet. So, if you want to join, just chime in on the thread.
Any standalone project updates?
Yeah, I sent this out in our Slack channels, but we are removing the dependency server, like I mentioned earlier. So the dependency server is where the non-Java build packs got their dependencies from. We had a bunch of GitHub Actions workflows that retrieved new versions, generated metadata, and then stored them on an API endpoint for us and uploaded the artifacts to a bucket. So we have kind of deprecated that in favor of our new dependency management system, which we had been working on for like the last few months, which we just closed out. So on March 3rd, in about a month's time, we will be fully removing the dep server. So the API endpoints if anybody was using them, won't be available anymore. But the dependencies that were stored there before will still be available. So let us know if you have any concerns about that, but it shouldn't affect anybody who's using Buildpacks because we've already transitioned to our new system.
If you had set up a custom API server using the same API, it would be that would be who was affected. So, and I believe actually that may continue to work for some time because we allow you to change your API endpoint. But then I believe that will be removed at the March 3rd deadline, correct? All right. I know that we're getting pretty close to the allotted time for this meeting. Are there any open questions we want to discuss further? All right. Thank you all for coming. It was a jam-packed meeting. Feel really good about how productive it was.
Thank you. Bye bye.
See y'all.
See you. Bye.
Bye.